Do I still believe in God? So one question I get from a lot of people who find out that I used to be a pastor, or people from my past who know I used to be a pastor, I used to be an evangelical Christian, is to say, well, you still believe in God, right? Let's talk about it. Now, one thing I always want to maintain is I will never down on anyone for their deeply held spiritual beliefs. You believe what you believe, and there's a lot of reasons why you believe what you believe. You have the religion that you have the spirituality that you have. And that's different for everybody, and I get that, and I understand that, and I will never, ever down on anyone for their deeply held spiritual beliefs. Now, if you don't know, you're new here, my name is Andy. I was an evangelical Christian pastor for 15 years. I grew up in the church. Both my parents were Baptist preacher kids. I was around it. I went to Christian school. I did all the things until 2017 when I pretty much, me and my family, we just left my career behind, and gosh, slowly kind of deconstructed my faith. And while I would no longer call myself a Christian, I don't hold anything against Christianity in and of itself. I think there's a lot of great stuff in there. I did go to Bible college. I've read the Bible backwards and forwards and forwards and backwards. I read it in the original, a lot of it in the original Greek and Hebrew, and a little bit in the Aramaic. I've studied it frontwards and backwards, and I'm not going to get into why theologically I don't think it's right anymore or any of that, but I want to get into what I believe and what I hold to, because I get this question so many times, and people want to know, am I still a Christian, or did you just leave the church? And I understand people's concerns. People have a genuine concern for my well-being, for my eternity, for my soul, and I get that because, you know what? I would have had the same questions for somebody in my situation back in 2016, 2015, back when I was still considering myself an evangelical Christian. And I know it's such a cop-out for me to say, well, I don't really consider myself religious anymore. I consider myself spiritual. But that really kind of sums up my belief system. While I don't hold to a systematic theology anymore or a systematic set of beliefs anymore, there are some principles that I live by and I get inspiration from. The best way to describe what I am as far as my spiritual beliefs is pantheist. Pan comes from the Greek meaning world, theist, God, and that is that there is deity, God, the divine, in everything, in this river behind me, in the mountains above me, in the trees that lie on them, that we can find the divine in all those things, in ourselves, in nature. Yeah. Now, what's ironic about this is I would have lambasted myself for calling myself a pantheist back in 2013, 14, back in my really dogmatic theological days. I was a bit of a Baptist Calvinist Reformed dude. If you know anything about it, just like Google Mark Driscoll, and you'll see kind of where I was at theologically for a very long time. And I was a pastor for 15 years. I started out as a youth pastor, a children's pastor, music pastor, associate pastor, youth pastor. I did all the things. I grew up going to Christian camps. I have held company with some of the nation's biggest, at the time, evangelical and Southern Baptist leaders because of churches I was working at, people who were underneath those pastors. A lot of those pastors are disgraced now, which is a conversation for another time. But I hold that there is really the divine in everything, and that we need to be kind to one another, just like we want others to be kind to us. It's the golden rule, and that seems like such a cop-out, and so many people right now are typing in the keyboards, no, it's about a relationship with Jesus. I get what you're saying. I no longer hold to that. And there's a lot of reasons why I don't hold to that. I've studied the Bible backwards and forwards. I've studied the history, the theology. I have some issues with the biblical canon and how that came about. I have some issues with, I think Gandhi put it best when he said, I like your Jesus, I don't so much like your Christians, because I was seeing so much hate and suffering and division within the Christian church. And that's not to say that's all Christians, because it's not, because I've met some amazing Christians. But for me, it kind of came down to two things why I left. The first being the really way the church, the evangelical church, the circles I was in treated people of color and the LGBTQ community. While much of the white evangelical church wouldn't openly admit, at least at the time, that they are racist, they were, and that bothered me. And much of the evangelical church I was a part of would say they were homophobic and they were kind of okay with it. No, they were totally okay with it. And as a youth pastor, I had teens, queer teens, coming to my youth group, but they were afraid to go to church on Sunday mornings because of the backlash, but they felt safe around me. And really my last two youth groups I was leading as a youth pastor of, had so many queer kids coming, and I always wondered why. I remember one conversation I had with my pastor at my second to last church. I was telling him about a girl who was coming who happened to be queer, and he said, she can't come on the retreat. And I'm like, why not? It's like, oh, because, she'll have to be sleeping with the girls and she might do something to one of them. And I'm like, really, bro? Really? Like, it's just that kind of thinking that really got me frustrated with the line of Christianity that I was in. And yes, I see people in the comments right now, not all Christians, I get that, but that was one of the reasons why I left. Another reason, honestly, is the attitude towards mental health. My wife and I have adopted 3 kids from foster care. Our 2 oldest, special needs. They were abused and neglected in every way you can possibly think of before we adopted them. And we were trying to get them help, and what was a huge encumbrance to us was I would have to go home in the middle of the day to assist my wife with a mental health crisis for my kids. And they would say, no, you need to let her handle it. You need to just pray the problem away. They'll be fine. You're too worried about it. God will take care of it. And it was really detrimental to my kids and my family, because we were sitting here fighting to get our kids mental health care that they needed. In Oregon, that's nearly impossible if you're under the age of 18. Even not much easier if you're an adult, a little bit easier. But they were actively telling us that we were overreacting, we didn't need to depend on therapists, and that we could pray the problem away and God would take care of it, and that we were overreacting, which time after time when we'd have crisis situations, I'd have to leave. They'd be like, you need to not be leaving to help your wife in these crisis situations. You could possibly lose your job, until I did, because I was tired of standing for the BS. So after I left, I discovered hiking at the behest of my therapist, and nature became my spirituality, because when I left, I had Christians are going to say, even evangelical conservative Christians are going to say, Andy, you had a God-shaped hole. No, I did have a hole there, because my entire life, my entire upbringing as a Christian and as a pastor centered around the church. And because it's centered around the church, that's where my community came from. That's where my meaning came from. That's where my purpose came from. And I didn't have that anymore. Any questions I had about the big questions of life, the universe, all that, was able to be answered, at least in my opinion, in the Bible, and that was gone. And my therapist said, try going for a hike. She literally said, take a hike. So I did. And I found these spaces. And my gosh, do you freaking see this? It's freaking nature, and it's freaking awesome. Wow, that's awesome. Now, I know a lot of you are saying, Andy, and I would have said the same thing, Andy, it's not this, it's the creator of this. And I get what you're saying. I understand that. But that's not where I've come theologically, personally, spiritually. I can't answer the big questions. Why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing here? What's our purpose? I can't necessarily answer those big questions, but I do know when I'm out here, I feel closer to the divine than I ever have in any building. So to answer the question, am I still a Christian? I would say by conservative evangelical definitions of what a Christian is, what my former definition of what a Christian is, I would say no. And that's okay. And if you still are, that's fine too. I just ask that you never, bash your beliefs on other people, and you love and accept all people for who they are, no matter who they are, where they come from, how they identify, or who they love. And if you can't do those things, that's when we're gonna have a problem. Anyways, guys, that's my video today, because I get asked this question so much that I thought it'd be nice to have a video just to point to, like, here's the answer to the question. Check it out. Check out my YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. It is really hot today. It's like 90 degrees. Thank you so much for watching. I'm not gonna back up too far here. Woo! YouTube thinks you're gonna like these videos. Check these out. Also, if you haven't subscribed or rang that notification bell, come down here, do that. You can follow me on all the various social media networks at Andy Films and Hikes, and I will see you later. Bye-bye!